The original premise of Watson dared to start its story at the most emotional moment of the BBC's Sherlock, with the seeming death of Sherlock Holmes. Watson Season 1 ended with not just the world's greatest detective dead, but also the death of Sherlock's greatest rival, Moriarty. Moriarty's machinations against the main characters in Watson were a running thread of Season 1, but there were no breadcrumbs suggesting Sherlock was alive. Therefore, it was a surprise when Robert Carlyle's casting as Sherlock Holmes was announced between seasons. Unfortunately, faking Sherlock's death was the beginning of the end for the BBC show. CBS Watson is officially repeating the same problem in resurrecting Sherlock, but it's much worse, since Sherlock was never supposed to be part of the show. Sherlock's return from the dead has already become a problem for Watson Season 2. Introducing Sherlock Holmes negates Watson's unique premise. Sherlock Holmes' reveal that he faked his own death poses an immediate problem for Watson Season 2, threatening to unravel what made the series distinctive in the first place. The show's premise, a medical mystery series where Watson needs to define himself in a post-Holmes world, gave it both emotional depth and a procedural structure. Watching Watson and Shinwell navigate grief and learn to trust their new team while exploring medical mysteries that grounded the familiar Holmes mythology in a fresh context. Sherlock's re-emergence is already disrupting the balance between medical and mystery in just one episode. Suddenly, Watson's independence feels imperiled by the gravitational pull of Sherlock Holmes, who is already planting seeds that threaten to wreak havoc on Watson's romantic life. Even if the show pulls back from Holmes' direct presence, the symbolic damage is already done. The show that dared to imagine life after Holmes now risks becoming yet another iteration of his story. Holmes' poorly handled return was the beginning of the end for BBC's Sherlock. Sherlock chose spectacle and fan service over character-driven storytelling. BBC's Sherlock stood as a revitalization of Conan Doyle's classic characters for a digital age. At its height, Sherlock felt like appointment television, prestige drama disguised as a genre show. But the decision to fake Sherlock's death in The Reichenbach Fall marked the beginning of the show's decline. Viewers were left with one of television's most haunting cliffhanger, an ending that felt bold, tragic, and final. But when the show returned, Sherlock failed to deliver a satisfying explanation. The resurrection played more like a cheeky trick than a revelation, glossing over emotional consequences in favor of fan service and spectacle. What should have been a defining emotional moment instead became a narrative gimmick. The resurrection undercut the gravity of Sherlock's apparent sacrifice and invalidated Watson's grief, leaving audiences feeling manipulated rather than moved. From that point forward, Sherlock struggled to reclaim its balance, leaning into showy twists and meta-commentary at the expense of coherent character development. Bringing characters back from the dead always risks cheapening what came before, and when handled without emotional or narrative grounding, it alienates the very audience it aims to thrill. That's why Watson's decision to resurrect Sherlock in Season 2 already feels worrisome. By reversing Sherlock's death, Watson threatens to repeat the BBC's mistake. Instead of committing to its unique premise, Watson unravels its most compelling idea, that life, and storytelling, can continue meaningfully after Sherlock Holmes. How Watson Season 2 should really handle Sherlock Holmes' presence. Holmes cannot become the main character. Watson Season 2 faces a delicate balancing act with the reintroduction of Sherlock Holmes. Though Holmes has already said his goodbyes to Watson, his shadow clearly lingers, especially as he embarks on a covert mission to dismantle the corrupt oligarchs in power, including his own brother. But the series must ensure Holmes doesn't eclipse Watson as the main character. Robert Carlyle's casting as Sherlock Holmes is a brilliant choice. Known for portraying morally complex figures like Rumpelstiltskin in Once Upon a Time, Carlyle brings a layered ambiguity that fits seamlessly into Watson's morally grey world. To this version of Holmes, the difference between friend and foe is slight. The simplest way forward is to keep Sherlock's investigation tethered to the hospital where Watson's clinic is based, as Sherlock implied he wants to be in Pittsburgh for a reason. This connection would naturally draw Watson and his team into the mystery, preserving the show's medical and emotional core while expanding its scope beyond case-of-the-week storytelling. Focusing on the hospital would also create organic tension with Mary, Watson's ex-wife, and the hospital's administrator. This is especially true if Holmes' actions begin to endanger her institution or reputation. Watson can take cues from Netflix's Enola Holmes films, which successfully decentered Sherlock while keeping him a vital, motivating force in the background. Handled carefully, Holmes' ongoing presence can deepen Watson's emotional landscape rather than derail it, expanding the scope of the show into greater mysteries. However, Sherlock's plan cannot become the driving force of Watson Season 2. Watson Season 2 can't be about Sherlock Holmes. Holmes should play the role Moriarty played in Season 1. Watson Season 2 cannot be all about Sherlock Holmes without losing the core of what made the show unique from other Sherlock adaptations. Season 1 struck a careful balance. It peppered just enough references to the Sherlock universe to stay relevant, but never at the expense of being a medical procedural. CBS has already seen that Season 1 episodes featuring legacy characters from the Holmes canon, like Irene Adler, drew stronger ratings than standalone cases, but relying too heavily on Holmes risks overshadowing Watson's central focus. But with Moriarty's death in the Season 1 finale, the show temporarily exhausted its built-in mythology. Sherlock's reintroduction should therefore remain peripheral, offering emotional and philosophical tension without commandeering the narrative. His presence can open rich storytelling avenues, such as exploring how Watson reconciles grief, betrayal, and the lingering influence of his former partner. In Season 1, Shinwell was keeping secrets. Now Watson is withholding information from Shinwell, creating a mirrored dynamic. Hopefully, Holmes will operate in the background, influencing the broader arc like Moriarty did in Season 1, while Watson's day-to-day medical cases make up the majority of the show. Sherlock's plan can peak at the beginning and end of the season, but the bulk of the episode should remain centered on Watson's clinic, his investigations, and his evolving relationships.